Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this Localis webinar held in collaboration with the We're Right Here campaign. My name is Joe Fiennes. I'm the head of research at Localis, and I'm joined by a really great panel today to discuss the issue of community power, to discuss how we can go from a situation where we so often hear the criticism, as in our title, the policy is done to, not with communities, to a policy-making model at central and local level that is genuinely collaborative and genuinely allows for community empowerment to take over services, take over assets, and run them as they see fit. I've got a great panel today. I'm joined by Ben Glover from the Independent Commission on Neighbourhoods, Eve Holt from the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, Councillor Saima Ashraf from the London Borough of Dagenham, and Andy Jackson from the Heeley Development Trust, and also a convener at the We're Right Here campaign, our partners in this event. And to get us started today, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, our senior researcher, Callum McLinden, as everyone files in here online, to give a little bit of a scene setting from a Localis perspective. The genesis of this event and an essay that Callum has put out today is a conversation he and I had a few months ago, looking at really the comparison of the first kind of 9 months as it was at the time of the Keir Starmer Labour government, comparing that to the equivalent period in the Boris Johnson Conservative government, on the basis that there were a lot of actually quite similar rhetoric going in to those governments around things like taking back control, around things of sort of localism and local power, whilst at the same time talking about big reforms that seem to be centralising. So we sort of wanted to look at, well, what's the policy been, what's the legislation been in the early stages, and that led to an essay that Callum has written, which we published today, on community power, which I'll put in the chat shortly, and also to us having a conversation with We're Right Here to put this webinar on. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Callum now to sort of set the scene, talk about community policy as it is now, as it has been recently, and where we might be going. Callum.
Yes, thank you, Joe. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here, and to our partners today, the We're Right Here campaign. And a special thanks to our 4 speakers for committing your time and offering your insights today. We greatly appreciate it. So, as Joe said, to briefly set the scene, it seems as though across England and beyond, from coastal towns to inner city estates and sort of everywhere in between, a quietly corrosive crisis has been playing out. Not just in the sort of potholes, the shuttered up libraries, but in something more profound, a perpetually growing sense that power has drifted further and further away from communities and neighbourhoods. As a result, politics and decision making has become something many people are simply subjected to, rather than something that they can contribute to or participate in. Today's webinar, therefore, seeks to take this crisis seriously, centred around a simple but increasingly urgent question: how do we reverse this disconnect? Not through more rhetoric, but through meaningful cultural, structural, and statutory change across governance. At Localis, our work is consistently grounded in principles of localism and subsidiarity. The idea that decisions should be made as close as feasibly possible to the people they affect, if not in collaboration with or by those peoples themselves. We're therefore proud to support our webinar partners, the We're Right Here campaign, and its push for a statutory framework that empowers communities directly, tangibly, and lawfully, not just to speak or engage, but to shape and genuinely co-develop their own areas, policies, and futures. As senior researcher, as Joe said, I've contributed an essay to contextualise today's discussion. The essay, titled Centralisation, Local Decline and the Future of Community Power, you can find the link in the chat, traces how successive governments and indeed oppositions, despite waves of localist rhetoric, have consistently retained a centralised control, often to the detriment of many communities and neighbourhoods across the country. From the sort of hollow promises of the big society, the opaque competitiveness of levelling up funds, and the multiple variations of take back control sloganeering from both sides. Communities have been asked to do more with less, without the resources, rights, or recognition needed to lead the real change at the local level. And many residents on their own swim have been made to simply accept material decline and poorer public services, with little to no means of a democratic pushback. The result, it seems, most people in this country are now without a civic life, thus deprived of any sort of sense of power or political agency, with this democratic deficit beginning to take on a sort of worryingly angry and desperate character, rife for reactionary exploitation. So the call I make in this essay, therefore, echoing many long before me, is clear. If the government cares for our democracy and is serious about a democratic renewal, it must go beyond this managerial decentralisation and commit to a genuine double devolution. This means embedding community power, not as perpetual pilots or add-ons to other bills, but as statute in its own right, enshrining rights to, for example, co-manage assets, initiate participatory processes, and draw down long-term resources. Because without these specified protected rights and the practical tools to use them, empowerment will remain rhetorical, and thus politics will continue to alienate our residents. So with a new government in place and some promising reforms already in motion, from new neighbourhood governance structures, the community right to buy and trailblazer programmes, there is a distinct window of opportunity. But the architecture behind this remains fundamentally incomplete, and centralised decision-making does seem to still be persisting. So without further guarantees in law, communities will remain subject to the discretion of others and continue to be frozen out of the political process, whether nationally, regionally or locally. And to be frank, undergirding these concerns of populism's rise, political instability, and the so-called end of our two-party system, there's a sort of truism of recent years that if not voting were a party, it would sweep the nation. And that should tell us everything we need to know about the scale of disenchantment with politics that the country's facing, and about the urgent opportunity and responsibility to do things differently. Thus, the future community power cannot necessarily depend on local political will alone. It must become hardwired into the structure and frameworks of our governance. So the question is no longer whether communities should be empowered to engage in politics and civic life. That debate, to me, is settled on many metrics. The question now is what kinds of governance structures, frameworks, mechanisms, funding and political culture can make widespread community empowerment and participation a reality. That is what this webinar is about, and I'm really excited to listen intently to our discussion today. And finally, if today does spark any ideas, questions or avenues for potential collaboration, please do not hesitate to get in contact with us at Localis. Any friend of this movement is a friend of ours, and the more that can be done to make it a political reality, the better. Take care, and hope you enjoy the discussion today. Thank you for listening.
Thanks so much, Callum. That's really helpful. I do read the essay, it's great. In terms of to this order of business today, I'm going to do it secondary school style. I'm going to do it alphabetical order by surname. So we're going to invite our panelists now to give us about 3 to 5 minutes of their perspectives on this broad theme before we throw to a Q&A. If you have any questions whilst people are talking, just stick them in the Q&A box in the chat. I will try to kind of get them together, group them as best I can so that everybody gets their concerns answered. And with that in mind, if I can hand over now to Councillor Saima Ashraf, the Deputy Leader of London Borough, Barking, Dagenham, and a Cabinet Member for Communities. Saima, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Joe, and good morning to all. So I'm the Deputy Leader of Barking and Dagenham, and my election to Barking and Dagenham Council in 2010 was a watershed moment locally, as 12 BNP councillors were ousted after 4 years of on the authority. And it was a community-focused and community-driven campaign that we saw the far right overwhelmingly rejected at the ballot box. So from that moment on, it was clear that the council had to learn lessons about listening, engaging and empowering the local community. And there was a sustainable way forward without, community leadership. An engagement, which is the portfolio I hold now in Barking and Dagenham Cabinet, and where I have been the Deputy Leader since 2014. So for too long, the council had been paternalistic, lost touch with its fast-changing borough, and with austerity, there had to be a realistic reset of public expectations, and we had to stop doing too and start doing more with the community. So an essential piece of work I undertook in 2016 and 2017 was the creation of the borough's long-term vision with a raft of ambitions targets for the future. And crucially, it was informed by over 3,000 resident responses and intensive engagement with the community, voluntary, faith sector, and also local groups, schools, youth groups, name it. I don't think I've left any stone unturned, and it was called the Borough Manifesto, which was a non-political document. We did not stop at the consultation and leave it to sit on a shelf. We met regularly with our community and key statutory partners to discuss how we would work together to deliver on the ambitions we'd designed together at an annual State of the Borough Conference and through the Barking and Dagenham Delivery Partnership. The key point being that in the community, and that if the community was extensively involved in the creation of this vision, they should also be empowered to deliver it and to speak truthfully to a council or health services and police forces that is ready and willing to listen and work together. So doing with, not doing to. This is something that we are now coming to review and update in a new strategic vision document. And once again, we are engaging the voluntary community and faith sector to ensure their voices in that document is preserved. And, Barking and Dagenham Council commenced several initiatives over the last 10 years to drive up resident engagement, build capacity, leadership and resilience in the social sector, and to enhance their role as trusted community partners who we know already do so much to deliver on our shared priorities. And I won't go through them all, but I wanted to mention three key strands of work as part of, efforts to increase community partnership and resident-led decision-making. We set up a resident panel to decide on how some of the funding from developers' contribution would be awarded to community initiative. And this was called the Neighbourhood Infrastructure, a Community Infrastructure Levy, the NCL, and over 1.2 million pound has been awarded since 2017. Crucially, all those projects awarded funding had to demonstrate how they were working towards our Borough Manifesto's objectives. And the council also formed a charitable organisation called BD Giving, which has been awarded almost £1.5 million by the council for an endowment. And its mission is clear: to drive up community participation and collective decision-making, develop local social infrastructure, test new ways to collaborate and facilitate more opportunities to discuss solutions to the root cause of community identified issues. So if we want to do with rather than to, we have to find many more ways to trust our resident and with participatory budgeting opportunities as well. And the council must also be open and honest partner to our trusted community groups. It's through this that we can do it with rather than to our resident to respond to their needs. And this could not have been demonstrated more clearly than the community response to the pandemic and the cost of living crisis. We, both showed that the work the council and the community had put in 2014 to build a strong collaborative relationship had put our community in a stronger position to collectively respond at a time of need. And Barking and Dagenham is a poor borough with significant inequalities, and our residents were hit hard by both the pandemic and the surging cost of living. And the council was in a position to provide all the help, wasn't in a position actually to provide all the help and support to our resident needed. So this is where the community stepped in, and through our BD Can, and I know presented that in the past as well to Localis, the support in the first lockdown was coordinated through those groups for all our vulnerable residents. So if we had not put in the hard work of resetting the council's relationship and trusting the communities to do more, supporting them with both practical and financial support, this community-led response simply would not have been possible. And this brings us to the plans we are developing today to further embed community collaboration into the council service provision and integration with health services through our neighbourhood plan. And this is very much about integrating and reimagining preventative local service across health and council services using digital technology and AI, as well as partnering with the community, voluntary and faith sector to create stronger connected communities. It's in line with the government, thinking about a neighbourhood health service and place-based leadership. Ultimately, this will see council officers working with community partners to deliver services either through connected services with, or by commissioning those groups who are close to the resident to deliver them. We will look at how they can be based out of council buildings, running those assets to provide important community spaces and services. And ultimately, if we want to do more rather than two, then as we've understood all well in Barking and Dagenham, we must not just listen to those who know our resident, but just like our resident, the council must also trust them to deliver too. So I will end up here, Joe, if that's okay.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Saima. That was a really great introduction. I want to now pass on to Ben Glover from the Independent Commission on Neighbourhoods, who have been doing all kinds of work in the past 6 months or so to highlight different neighbourhood level issues, inequalities, etc., and have just published a long piece, which is also a new statement we can essay, which we were just talking about. So I'm going to hand over to you now, Ben.
Cheers, Joe. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, we've done a lot of publishing. I'll maybe put a few links in the chat. Just a brief introduction on what the Independent Commission for Neighbourhoods is. We were set up in September 2024, and we're chaired by Baroness Heeley Armstrong, who, if you don't know, was a cabinet minister in the last Labour government and worked on programmes such as Sure Start and New Deal for communities. The remit of the Commission is to investigate the challenges facing disadvantaged neighbourhoods in England. We're tasked with coming up with some ideas and proposals in 2025 to make a real kind of big push on this agenda with obviously a new government. So far, we have done a couple of things. One, we've identified what we call mission critical neighbourhoods. Those are the 630 neighbourhoods in England that are furthest from the government's 5 missions. Those tend to be in 3 camps: one, coastal communities, places like Blackpool, Clacton, Jaywick, Ramsgate. They also tend to be ex-industrial towns or villages. These are often in the northeast, and they might have had 1 or 2 dominant industries: coal mining, shipbuilding, coal-fired power stations, those sort of things. And the third group is city kind of peripheries, or the city suburbs. We did a big analysis of England's neighbourhoods since 2001, and you see a real suburbanisation of poverty. The challenges that used to be in the inner city, not everywhere, but certainly in the core cities, have moved outwards. I think that's something that policymakers could do a bit more to think about. So we've kind of got our broad agenda improving these places, and we've identified them. Obviously, the question is, as ever, what's to be done? We've been pushing the government hard for investment in disadvantaged neighbourhoods. What's different to the Levelling Up agenda is that we're particularly interested in a genuine neighbourhood. So we talk about neighbourhoods in a very small level, frankly more granular than anyone else probably in Whitehall or Westminster. So our mission critical neighbourhoods are LSOAs. If you're a bit of a nerd like myself, that's 1 to 3,000 people. So that's really quite small. That's like a small estate or a bit of a larger estate or a couple of streets. And we think you need to intervene at that sort of level or a little bit bigger. So the New Guildford communities, I think, was on average between 8 and 10,000 residents. So this is not interventions at a city region level. It is not interventions at a city level. It is not interventions at a town level. It's smaller than that. And that's because we think when you start to look at the world at this neighbourhood level, you see patterns and you see reality in a way which comparing things always at a bigger scale doesn't do. And I think public policy, certainly since the late noughties, has moved away from a neighbourhoods perspective and has preferred regional analysis, north versus south, London versus the rest, or its preferred analyses such as town versus city. I'm not saying those things don't have their attractions. I think some areas of public policy are well suited to a larger geographical analysis. But if you're really trying to tackle entrenched, particularly social and economic problems, so generations of worklessness, deep entrenched crime and antisocial behaviour, incredibly poor health outcomes, those will often cluster very densely at a neighbourhood level, and you need a neighbourhood intervention to address them. And I've not really talked about power, which is something that I should certainly talk about because it's really important. It's not going to work just pouring in a load of money to these places. We've been banging the drum very, very loud and clear for what we call community-led regeneration and change. That means funding genuinely organic, local, trusted organisations to lead change in areas. That might be a local sports club, might be a long-standing charity or community interest company. It could be other parts of the sort of third sector. We think these people are best placed to lead the change. That doesn't mean not working with local government or other formal parts of the state, but to put it frankly, the public sector in these places has often let down these places and trust is very, very low in all tiers of government. So we think it's really important that change is genuinely community-led for kind of trust and consent. And there's a lot of evidence as well that when regeneration programs are genuinely community-led, the social and economic outcomes are better. And I think that's why New Deal for Communities worked so well. Majority of the boards that governed New Deal for Communities at local were made of local residents. A lot of them were elected. It was a genuine attempt to shift the dial on governance away from just the state doing things. So absolutely the state needs to fund, and I think that's the most important role for central government. But the change itself needs to be led by trusted local organisations, and we're delighted that the government has put significant funding into this agenda at the spending review. We're going to be working hard to make sure that that change is genuinely community-led, and that's kind of our focus at ICON for the coming weeks and months. I can maybe talk more about government policy in the Q&A, but that's sort of what we're trying to do and how it relates to Callan's brilliant and provocative paper. So well done, Callan, on that.
Thanks so much, Ben. That's really helpful. I also am really pleased to have Eve Holt from Great Manchester Combined Authority, because obviously, as Ben rightly said, there was a lot of focus on neighbourhoods communities in the spending review and the devolution white paper. But in recent years, the kind of the strategic authority has been the focus government policy. It remains the focus government policy. So I think it's really great to have Eve here to sort of talk about from an officer perspective how it's done in Greater Manchester, which is often seen as kind of the poster child, if you will, of the strategic authority model. So please, Eve, it'd be really great to hear from you on that.
Great, thanks, Joe. It's great to be with you all and to be part of this conversation. And yes, Greater Manchester has been held up, hasn't it, as the poster child of devolution. And I kind of picture us really as a sort of a 10-year Devo child sat on the shoulders of our ancestors, because actually this story is a story that goes very deep in Greater Manchester, in our soil. We are the place, right, of the co-op movement. We are the place of the suffragette movement, of the reformists. You can look through our history and see repeatedly community-led change. It's our story, it's our identity. And I think that's absolutely critical, and we keep reminding ourselves of that. It's also, I'd say, my story. It's why I absolutely love living here and working here. I grew up in a commune, I grew up in a community in the sort of late 70s, 80s, where we saw injustice everywhere and was very much raised in the belief that no one was coming over the hill to save us. The route to social justice was in taking action and doing that in a whole myriad of different ways, and inviting others to join in. And that's why I guess I now love being in a position where, after a career that spanned public services, law as a solicitor, 10 years across the BCFSE sector as a leader, 6 years as a counsellor, I now have the absolute joy of working with Andy Burnham in the Combined Authority on going, how do we take all that learning and that history to actually, in this moment, deliver the changes and that rewiring of the state and of our kind of culture, to really put community power at the heart of everything we do. And we are doing that. We're genuinely doing it. We're bridging between that kind of rhetoric and reality. So, you know, I do think that in terms of, I guess, our sort of story of now, of this moment, you know, as was set out, I really think that we are at this kind of critical crossroads now where we feel it, don't we? We see the level of sense of disenfranchisement and people feeling so powerless. And I think this is critical in terms of how we ensure everybody, as we say in Greater Manchester, lives a good life, is in really addressing that challenge of power and recognising that we're not going to generate greater health and good lives unless we disentangle, you know, and understand power and ownership and wealth in all of that. So what we're doing in GM, well, we've just launched our Greater Manchester strategy, so I can ping the link to that in the chat shortly, and hopefully you'll see that's, I think, a really coherent systemic view of how we enable people to live good lives in GM in a thriving city region, and sets out effectively 7 kind of key building blocks for how we enable people to live a good life. The first of those being about housing first, which is critical. I'm going to focus on the 5th of those, which is GM Live Well. So this is probably what people are looking at as our real movement in Greater Manchester now, which genuinely has community power and community wealth and community ownership at its heart. And the model is it has to be community led and system enabled. I just want to make the point that this also, though, community power sits at the heart and is in our how across all of our missions, not just in Live Well. So we see it, you know, we've seen it in our work in addressing homelessness in Greater Manchester. You can see how we've used very participatory processes to develop our strategies and policies. You can look at our legislative theatre work. You can, you know, there's lots across all areas of work. So it's not limited to Live Well, but I'm going to focus on Live Well for some practical examples. So Live Well it's our kind of public service reform at the scale of 2.9 million people. So it's saying what we need to do is enable everyone to access everyday support in every neighbourhood. And we need to do all those things we've talked about for a long time about how we genuinely wrap support and the mutual care of neighbours around people in their places. And do that in a systemic, everywhere, every day, everyone kind of way. And that obviously means really shifting where resource goes. So as we've talked about before, one of the key commitments in that is saying we know that if we're going to have a community-powered movement, we need to redirect resources that currently often go to, you know, maybe from DWP to commercial enterprises to provide employment support, for example. And instead, we're going, no, we need to reroute those through our local VCFSE organisations, our trusted partners who work with genuinely in communities, people who are closest to the problems that we're trying to address. So there's that real commitment to doing that. And, you know, we're seeing where we're now designing into our integrated settlement, into all resources going out, a really firm commitment around actually really has to go to the VCFSE. It's not a question anymore. It's an obligation and expectation. But I'd also say it's not just about a kind of top-down instruction. This is what our localities are doing. This is, you know, Ben came to Wigan as part of the commission recently, and I think, you know, hopefully he saw and felt that there's this real understanding across all 10 of our boroughs that the only way we're going to address our multiple crises and make these changes is if we do these things differently. And we like to talk in Manchester about doing things differently, and there's a lot we do differently, but there's a lot that we've kind of has become quite entrenched as well, and that does need to be unlearned and does need to be changed. So, you know, a few examples of ways, you know, that the Live Well movement is really genuinely bringing together that alliance of citizens, of communities, of VCFSE, alongside a public sector, our private sector. We're building on all that learning around different participatory methods for policy making and making change happen. So we've had lots of, like everybody else, we've tested participatory budgeting, we've tested legislative theatre, we've had assemblies, juries of some sort, but now we're going, how do we make sure that we're using the right methods in the right time all the time? And developing a participatory kind of toolkit at the moment to help spread and grow the good practice, both in GM, but also it's obviously open to anybody else. We're really thinking about our governance. So what does more transformative governance look like? Where we hardwire, again, citizens' voice and participation into our governance. We don't just see them as somebody who we might kind of take ideas from and open the door to have some power some of the time. It's like, how do they have a say in everything all of the time? And then we're really thinking about, I said, resource and where resource goes differently. And this builds on, some of our commitments. Like those of you that have read the new Civil Society Covenant nationally will have seen the Greater Manchester VCFSE Accord was referenced in there, which again has been part of our foundations of going, how do we build this equal relationship and partnership all the time between VCFSE, civil society and our public sector, and recognise the roles that, again, everybody has to play, and then provide that continuous invite for people to join in and play their role. Just to finish, I guess a couple of key things that I'd want to say about learning, and I think we've touched, I think Saima ended on this really, is so critical to this is that belief in people and trust in people. And this is what I think Andy Burnham has really helped provide. You need leaders who genuinely trust people and communities as the solution, and who then put that into practice. And you'll hear him in every room. He genuinely believes that everybody, if you set them up to succeed, they will, that everyone deserves dignity and that everyone's got a contribution to make, and that we need to enable that. And that is really critical. It's not just expecting people to trust us and yet somehow not giving trust back. I also think shifting what we measure. So I know there's lots, questions around what are some of the statutory changes. I sometimes get nervous that if we focus on statutory changes, we give up our power in the here and now, because a lot of this is things that we can do in our shifting mindsets and culture right today in enabling more people to put their trust in people and communities and shift the way that our workforce and our resources work. I think shifting the way that things are measured is critical, and there's things that we have in our control that we are doing to make sure that we're measuring things like agency and community connectiveness as critical to delivering our Greater Manchester strategy. We're not just looking at some of the old traditional kind of measures, but we need the government and others to also shift some of their measures and, hey, think about community wellbeing as a key measure. And I think if we do that, naturally what you'll find is the flow from that is we'll be investing in community power as opposed to into some other areas of work. I also, just to finish, I think there's a critical question about mindset around power. The great thing about this work and about the Live Well movement is it's about building trust, it's about building energy, it's about building a movement and power. None of those are zero sum. And people forget that. When you focus on finances, you end up with something that's finite and it's shifting. And people talk about power as shifting. It's not. You create the conditions and power can grow exponentially. You can grow power in communities in a way that continues to grow. If you grow trust, it will continue to grow. If you grow a sense of agency, it will continue to grow and spread. And that, I think, is critical at a time where we have lots of headwinds, we have lots of bumps in the road, and building that sense of energy and momentum. So to get us over the bumps, not to ignore them, it's because of the bumps, because of how hard it is. I think we need to really focus on there. So look to where the energy is, and remember, it's not about necessarily having to take power from one place. We can grow it if we create the right conditions. And I'll stop there.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Eva. That was excellent. And to finish off, we'll get into Q&A. Last in the alphabetical order of surnames is a view from the front line. It's a military metaphor. It probably feels like a war sometimes, Andy. Running a social enterprise. Andy is the Chief Executive of the Heeley Development Trust, and really great to hear from you today.
Thank you. Nice to speak to everybody. So my name's Andy. I live and work in a little community in South Sheffield. Our history is kind of embattled, but also it's very hopeful because we have already proved that we can do this. And when I say we, I'm one of a team of people who grew up in this neighbourhood. My story is my little ex-steelworking community, my family were all in that industry, just south of the city centre. And as I grew up listening to the stories of houses being cleared, the place being called a slum, which uncle had been laid off or put on short time, always knew from a mum and dad thing how things were going, because they always laid steel workers off just before Christmas, which was always, you know, kind of, it's big in your mind. So I grew up there. My kids grew up there, and we're just normal, ordinary local people. And at the end of that process of watching the neighbourhood being called a slum, the housing being cleared, without a thought for what would happen to the shops and services or the local school, I grew up into becoming a community worker. So my organisation is one of thousands around the UK. We identify ourselves as a community anchor because we're sat here in this place trying to hold the stories, the narrative and the plans and hopes of local people as they walk through our door. And we started with the transfer of the land that was left derelict for more than a decade. Having had enough of waiting, local people said we could do this. And they created a development trust to bring in funds and hold a message and the values and to take the land and the leases on. So my normal story is we didn't start with a building or an income. We started with 125 years of grass cutting. That's where we started, which changes how you think about everything, because you're not thinking in the lifetime of a politician, you're thinking in the lifetime of a tree or a park. And then I guess the next thing is that as a local person looking at how do I demonstrate the money we need and how do we build a plan, I was required to prove how crap my neighbourhood was. And that made me very grumpy. And we decided right from day one we were going to define a plan around how cool it was. And our park had to be the first emblem, not of a liability of grass cutting and how are we going to get this done and how much does it cost to run a mower, but how can we make our neighbourhood look really great, really valued, really invested in. And that's where we started. And after 27 odd years of independent, fiercely independent, local, values driven, asset-based, selling the neighbourhood up, not down, leading by example, all of these values, and a board who've come with us over that period of time and have been re-elected along the way. We're here, and I know that we've contributed, independently assessed, £100 million to the economy of Sheffield through delivering asset-based community development, very independent of the state. And over the course of that time, of course, I was part of a partnership of local people coming together as elected representatives of their neighbourhood, putting forward their neighbourhood's plan for the future, what they thought was needed, which shops and services, how do we support the school, where are the green spaces, how do we train young people. We as local people were planning for the long term in that way. And that was only 27 years, 30 years ago that we were doing that. And the thing that stopped it, interestingly, was legislation that said we were going to do double devolution. And so I'm really interested to think about that today and to learn that lesson as we read the white paper and we look at how devolution is going to happen this time, because what happened was a beleaguered state received its devolution and failed to pass that on because there was no mandate to do it. There was only the ideal of doing it. The ideal was perfect. The moment was so exciting. Now, the reality is, for the next however long I've been here, was that I gradually watched all the services we delivered in this neighbourhood-led democratic way being turned into procured and commissioned, atomised, risk-averse, deficit-based services. So it's almost impossible to do today what we did then is how it feels right now, but we know how. And we have a real moment to turn the white paper. It's why I'm involved in We're Right Here, because it was the first time I could see a movement that was trying to get upstream and create conditions for success. It was requiring or demanding that devolution genuinely was double next time. that we have the right to influence services in our neighbourhoods, that we're competent and able to do it. And there are examples all over the country. Even if there are gaps, we have to start somewhere. And there is so much expertise, and we've just never worked out quite how to unlock it. And that's why we're right here is important. That's why I'm here. Anyway, that's enough.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Andy. I mean, that's really, really helpful. And I want to actually, I do want to start the kind of Q&A session with the panel on something you're saying there, Andy, which is that you've got to start somewhere, and it also leads back to what Eve was saying about kind of the authority going on a bit of a journey from the citizen juries right through to where they are now. We've got a lot of senior local authority people watching. The fact that they're here makes me feel like they probably do want to do kind of something to better engage communities. If I could ask the panel, I guess in reverse order, maybe start with yourself, Andy. If you, where do you start? If you were to give one piece of advice to a policy director or in a local authority who wanted to better engage and wanted to better consult with communities and actually transfer power, where would you say they should begin, or just any sort of tip off the top of your head?
Okay. So the narrative that I'm in right now with my local authority is one of how do we work together to create the conditions for success? And one of the first things we need to do, like right now, my team of social prescribing link workers, or the parkies, or whoever it is in the organisation, all local people, local jobs, I can't guarantee any of them beyond next March because we're into a procurement cycle. So I can't deliver community jobs that are long-term, have training and good conditions. So the conditions for success, day one, we need a 3 to 5 year plan for how we work together. We all need to accept, we have to relearn how to do that. We have to start from square one. We have to share jobs across each other's services. We have to have leadership and the next generation's leadership at the heart of what we do, because we need to create new leaders. It's not all about old duffers like me. Old white men are not who we need running our communities next. How do we create the next generation of leaders? How do we support the conditions for success? It's not procurement. It's definitely not voluntary. It's not risk averse, and it's not kind of atomizing services down into tiny chunks. It's about a whole neighbourhood plan, genuinely shared and led together. And I'd start with 3 to 5 years. That's what I'm trying to do right now.
Brilliant. No, that's very helpful. Eve, what about yourself? If you were to sort of pass on a piece of advice to someone at a local authority who wanted to try and build something here?
I would say be present in a place. Remember that it's not about consulting, it's being part of communities. We are part of communities, you know, that's the difference. And if you're not, find somebody else who is and resource them and be alongside. I'd say give some resources to the community that you're facing. Create those conditions, as Andy said, for them to lead and feel it, and bring as many people as possible in to see it and feel it for themselves. So what the GM Live Well movement's been doing is creating lots of spaces of hope, and that word again is important. We need to grow hope, and we're growing hope. And creativity and joy and community. This is the stuff that energizes us, that connects us as human beings, and it helps cross over those boundaries between professional and people who are there as citizens and communities. And often we've got lots of leaders who are feeling all the pressures that are currently on the system, and that creates fear. It creates a sense of pressure. It creates a sense of maybe we need to have control and top down, unauthoritative. And it creates behaviours that work away from exactly what we need to be doing in this moment. And I find what gets unlocked is when they step into a space that is led by people in communities. It's been resourced to do that. And where they see and feel the energy that is generated in that space and the possibility, potential for change, and suddenly lift their heads and go, wow, there's an abundance of people here. And there's an abundance of resource who can solve the problems that I feel like are weighing really heavy on my shoulder. And I've seen that unlock huge amounts. Now, often they go back into their spaces and they feel the pressures again and they lose that sight again. So you have to keep building those spaces and keep bringing them back in. So I'd say crack on and do it and demonstrate, which is why, you know, we're describing ourselves now as the, you know, prevention demonstrator. And in this space, we need to do it, engage through doing together.
Absolutely, yeah, and that point on sort of seeing communities as a resource, I think is really important, and something that can really help at local authority level. Ben, you've been going all over the country, looking at neighbourhood level initiatives. What would you say would be a good piece of advice for a local authority?
Oh yeah, I mean, as Eve was saying, we had a great visit up to Wigan, and we've had a busy events programme. Hillary's been out most Fridays this year. We've been all across the country, and yeah, I think Wigan Council are an absolute exemplar in this space, and their willingness to support, and not just through warm words, which can be a bit of an issue in this space, but financially, community-led organisations and charities, even when, you know, those are genuinely independent organisations who might be willing to be critical about the council, even with the council there, I think shows a level of maturity and grown-upness, which, to be honest, too often don't see across local government. I think this was really well put to us when we were visiting a community organisation. They basically say, you know, you come onto this estate with a council lanyard, and you know you're going to kind of get told to jog on, basically. And I think that's the value of working with these genuine community-led organisations. Obviously, there are challenges where social capital is particularly low. You might have had a loss of one dominant industry, and with that, the miners' welfare, the working men's clubs, and all the social infrastructure that industry supported. So sometimes it's going to be more of a capacity building role for you know, government to support in those places. But yeah, you'll be surprised. You can go to places which on paper don't look like they have much, but they'll often have a great charity, a great sports club, a great something. We are very, yeah, despite austerity, despite the challenges facing civil society, we are very blessed in this country still with a great and dedicated voluntary sector, which, you know, with a small amount of support will do, you know, deliver returns that frankly the public sector alone would never be able to get close to. So yeah, I think for me it's about identifying those organisations and trusting them, and you know, going beyond how the public sector often likes to operate, which can be sometimes very controlling, can be very risk averse, and it can not want to share credit. So yeah, I think it's about putting cash behind the offer, basically. Really, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been some points made in the chat, right? So about, you know, the putting your money where your mouth is has to be a part of this. It's not everything, but it certainly helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Saima, from your perspective in Borough and Dagenham, sort of the journey you've been on, what kind of things do you think local authorities looking to go on a similar journey should be considering?
Well, I just along the lines of what has been said, I think that, you know, really giving the power to people and also the community groups, voluntary social faith groups, is the way forward. It's not always about money, but, you know, I mean, I know that money helps. However, it's about that partnership and collaborative approach. The vision that, you know, we have, we in Barking and Dagenham, what we've been doing is having more community groups setting up consortiums, taking ownership of buildings that the council cannot afford to run. We recently have the DWP moving into one of our libraries, for example, along with other community groups, and you've got, you know, loads of services being delivered under one roof, and giving this opportunity to our resident also to be able to easily join. And when we say that, you know, creating the neighborhood plan is like, you know, for people to be able to just go within a walking distance of their property to a place where they can get all the help and support that they need, but also, you know, getting involved into delivering some of the services that are needed to the community. I think it's very important that we, you know, as local authorities, I mentioned earlier, we used to say we don't want to be paternalistic. We still stay some kind of like paternalistic, you know, way is still present, and it's like, how do we let it go? It makes me laugh at the same time because we keep talking about it, but it doesn't always fully happen. And it's like, you know, our resident can, if we trust them, if we let them do it, they can deliver. It's just a matter of letting go. And that's what we're trying to do here in Barking and Dagenham.
And for another question, we're going to come back straight to you, Saima, because I think this is relevant to the whole panel, but obviously, you mentioned the SEC 106 funding and sort of using developer contributions in the community on that. Regeneration obviously has to play a role. As anyone who knows, everyone know in Barking and Dagenham, you've had major regeneration in the Riverside and still ongoing. How do you kind of link in community groups and social infrastructure with projects of that size and scale, given how important the government, and this goes through multiple governments, how much importance they've placed on this type of regeneration for growth?
So two ways, and I mentioned them in the start. We've got the NCL, which is the Neighbourhood Community Infrastructure Levy, and that's, writing to our resident to be part of a panel of like a dragon's den. They come and they see what the needs or the issues are in the community, and you've got community groups coming to bid for that funding, but the resident decide and make decisions. So they decide who they want to fund what for. That also leads them to go and visit those groups, also be part of like the delivery mode, etc. And then we've got the BD Giving, which is an endowment fund. They also have resident panels setting up, the growth fund, for example. So then you've got smaller businesses or community groups to come and apply for funding. So that money is used within the community, decided by the community, delivered to the community. So it's money that is well recycled within Barking and Dagenham.
I think that's crucial, yeah. And I guess, Andy, if I could bring you on this, because obviously they talk about a long journey. Sheffield, lots of regeneration. You're seeing buildings that used to be estates now going as luxury flats, etc. I mean, how do you guys kind of, from your level, try to link in with this, and how do you interact with the council on it, if at all?
Okay, so our interaction with the council has improved significantly lately, and we've extended our area of operation at their request and at the request of local people to include another whole estate where there is a regeneration programme stalled at the starting blocks while we work out how to support the council to engage the voice of residents fully. And it's been a source of some frustration over this year to work out how to do that. So I go from this today to another meeting with a community leader to try and persuade them that we need a cohesive, strong voice at the table, and that we're not there yet, that going back to the council and saying we'd like this, or that would be nice, or you can't make this all about gentrifying our neighbourhood isn't how to do this. Actually, we need control of the budget. We need to have a really ambitious plan. We need to think about our neighbourhood in 20 years, not right now. It's not just about what's happening in this instant and the current voices. It's about we need to rebuild our cities around a future economy, not the past one. Right, yeah. That's what we're trying to do right now. Brilliant. And this is a neighbourhood. Yeah. My favourite story, and it kind of defines some of the challenge for me. I caught somebody the other day. They were litter picking. I've not seen them for ages, so I stopped and had a chat. And they were like, "Well, I'm doing it. We're on our own now, aren't we?" And it was framed in that way, and it left me thinking, "Geez, that's an incredible thing that somebody's out there taking that control and sense of pride and all of that." But the message that's come out at the end of it is, well, we're on our own. So it's not a win, it's a loss. And I think we're doing that to ourselves a lot in our politics and our narrative right now. It's like, let's get off moaning about the past and think we're going to change things. All of us need to change things. We're all doing that stuff. It's action. So I think about that little chat quite a lot.
Yeah, no, Baron's Brian, a very astute point. Eve, not short of cranes in the sky in Greater Manchester, I wonder sort of how you guys kind of with programs like Live Well, how you try to integrate that.
Yeah, and maybe I'd keep your eyes out on the Male Development Corporation in Middleton. So Steve Coogan and Rose Marley are going to be co-chairs for that going forward, and Middleton Cooperating, which is a brilliant community-led organisation that's doing lots around how we have more community-led regeneration in the space, are very much at the heart of all of that as well. So I think that's one to watch. to see that transition from I guess some regeneration kind of investment growth focused areas that maybe haven't had the same level of community involvement and community power at the heart of them consistently, maybe. So that's one. I think, so at the heart of Live Well is this idea of having a network of live well sort of centres and spaces in which everybody is welcome. You can turn up and you're more likely to be met by a cup of tea and a smile than by a security guard, in which whatever your needs are, you'll be met by somebody who can support you and to navigate the current system, but hopefully then rewire that system so it actually works for you. So, and a lot of that is about shining a light on what's already strong in terms of community held assets and making sure that we're resourcing those and that we're illuminating that they are doing the work that we're talking about in Live Well, and making sure that they can sustain and grow and have all the key kind of hallmarks features of a good Live Well space. So we recently got on one of our lovely yellow buses and took people on a tour of some of these spaces around Greater Manchester, which was to again help people see and feel for themselves as senior leaders working at all parts of the system, so that they recognise the difference that makes. So yeah, it's doing it at all levels, isn't it? As a councillor, I spent a lot of time trying to as well embed within all our kind of master plans, participatory policy making, and it's making sure that all of us play our role in rewiring.
Absolutely. And finally, I might pivot, Ben, actually from to you, because we had a great question in the chat from Alison Hunt talking about funding sources. And I wonder, have Icon, there does feel like there's sort of a morass of kind of sources of money, and we saw a lot of this with the pots and stuff. I wonder, have Icon done any work or looked at any work on kind of the plurality of funding available and how that how that plays out at community level when you have so many different sources?
Absolutely, it's a great question. So in our green paper, we weren't quite big on this call for a neighbourhood intervention for England, and that's why we're really happy the government has set up the Trailblazer Neighbourhoods, which is extension for Plan for Neighbourhoods. So money is important, but you're absolutely right that there's too many different funding pots, funding sources, programs, initiatives, blah blah blah. There's a wide array of things happening. Obviously, activity is good, but it needs to be well coordinated. So one of the ideas in our green paper was a national strategy to be run from potentially the centre of government. I mean, it's up for ministers and officials to figure that stuff out, but yeah, it needs to be a lot more joined up at the centre for sure. There's neighbourhood health service stuff, which is great. Lots of investment in neighbourhood policing. Cabinet Office is doing test and learn, sometimes operating at neighbourhood level. So there's a lot going on, and I think we need to to start joining up in communities. It has to be joined up in national government to begin with. So yeah, it's something we'll be talking more about in the coming weeks and months from an Icon perspective, the need for national strategy. And it's we had one before. There's a national strategy for neighbourhood renewal, which tried to coordinate things like need of communities, Sure Start, lots of work on antisocial behaviour done under the last Labour government. There's a recognition that those things need to be brought together. So yeah, we'll be talking more and more about that for sure. Yeah.
Brilliant, thanks so much, Ben. Well, I'm gonna draw us. We've run out of time so quickly. I could do this. I could do this all day. And if anybody would like to talk about it any longer, like Karen said, do get in touch with Localis. But just to finish off and make sure we all get out of here on time for our next meeting, I want to just huge thanks to the We're Right Here campaign for helping us put this together. Massive thanks to our panel, Saima, Eve, Andy, Ben, for all your brilliant contributions, and everybody for turning up. Do have a read of Karen's essay. It's on our website and in the chat. I think as some made the point in the chat, that it's so important that we keep talking to each other across the whether that's from local authorities, community movements, central government, make sure we keep sharing these perspectives and keeping these issues sort of front and centre as we move on what is going to be a devolution journey with its bumps in the roads, I'm sure, as we carry on over next year. So it's just, keeping these types of events together, keeping the conversation going is really important. So do keep in touch. Thanks again to our panel and to We're Right Here, and I hope to see everybody again at a Localis event very soon.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you. Hope to see you all.
Cheers. Thanks so much.